Hi guys, welcome to Pixel Affair. It's Kobe here. So in today's video, we are going to see how we will create our own version of this artwork I saw on Instagram by Random Zero Mograph, right? So this is the artwork. You can see it's like some Tetris blocks moving upwards, and it's looping basically, right? And you are going to see how we will do this using Cinema 4D. I don't know if it's Cinema 4D that he used to do this work, but let's see how we create similar effects using Cinema 4D. And you can later check him out, Random Zero Mograph on Instagram, right? So this is the same scene, a similar scene I've created using Cinema 4D. And let's actually get into how we will do this. And it's quite simple, right? So let me start a new scene here. So I'm using Cinema 4D R26, but I'm sure you should be able to do this in almost every Cinema 4D version that you have, especially if you have the Voronoi fracture. So now let's come in here and create a matrix object. So I'll come into my clone Mograph object and I'll create a matrix object. I'll set the count to 7 by 7 by 7, right? And I'll change the mode from per step to endpoint, and I'll set that one, the size to 170 by 170 by 170. Right, so we've generated this cube, small matrix. Now let's come in here into our object and create a cube. I'll go into the other views like the front view or the right view, and you can see our matrix fits right into our cube. That's what we want. So now I'll come into my Mograph object again. I'll create a Voronoi fracture, and I'll make the cube a child of the Voronoi fracture. I'll select the Voronoi fracture, come into the source, and then I'll delete the point generator distribution that it's created initially. We will delete this one, and now let's replace that one. Drag and drop the matrix in here. What that happens is that it make the matrix now cut our cube, the big cube, into smaller chunks of cubes, right? And you can actually use if you come to our deformers, you can use the explosion deform FX deformer to do something similar to this idea, right? But in this case, because of the volume of our blocks, I'm using the Voronoi fracture. So after we have these small chunks of cubes, we want it to get a cluster of them, right? And to do that, I'll select the Voronoi fracture. I'll come down to geometry glue here, and now I'll enable geometry glue so that it wouldn't be just small chunks of cubes, but then if we set the glue type from fall off to cluster, we have clusters, right? So you can take, let's say 3, 4, 10, depending on the number of cluster amount you set. You can take, let's say 10, 20 cubes and use them to form one like chunk of fracture. So let's increase our cluster to something like 150, right? And now you can see we have these chunks created. Right, you can play with the seed if you think you don't like the way it's arranged and all of that. But in this case, maybe, I think this one is fine. All right. So now that we've created our chunks, basically this is our blocks that we've created. So from here going, it's up to us to play with the Mograph, the animation. So we can simply use, let's say, plane effector. Right. You can hide the matrices for now. You can use plane effector and come to our fields and use a linear field, and you can see we can use it to get it to move individually, right? To move them up like the way we want. But we are not going to use the plane effector because we want them to move individually, right? One by itself. We don't want them to move in chunks or in rows or anything. So I'll delete the plane effector, and I'm going to use the inheritance effector. So I'll go ahead and create a null object. Let me hide the Voronoi for now. Create a null object. I'll change the mode of the null object from the shape to something like a cube. Let's make it bigger so that we see what we are doing. And let's animate our null object. So I'll select the null object at frame, come to the coordinates, and at frame 0, I'll set a keyframe. At frame 30, I'll animate it 200 centimeters upwards, right? And if we hit play, you can see it's moving upwards. Let's come to our timeline, click on this dot here. And now let's select the animation, the keyframe position, and click on this to make it, no actually, we can leave it on the curve and let's adjust it to move faster. So I'll select the Y, click on this thing here to bring up the curves, and then I'll make this kind of sharp curve. So it starts very quick and smoothly slows down, basically, right? So now let me hide this, and now if I hit play, you can see it starts quick, very quick, and slows down. And that's the animation we want every individual Voronoi fracture Voronoi to have basically. So I can hide my null object. And now, how do we make our individual fractures inherit that kind of animation? And that's what we are going to use the inheritance effector. So now we come to our Mograph effectors, and I'll choose inherit. Right, I'll select the Voronoi fracture, come into the effector tab, and I'll drag and drop in the inheritance effector. So now the inheritance effector now affects the Voronoi fracture. Now let's go into the inheritance effector and do our settings. So I'll select the inheritance effector. I'll drag it down somewhere here. And we want the fractures to inherit the movement or the animation of this null. So select the inheritance effector, come to the effector tab here, and now let's drag and drop in this null object to object field here, and now you can see it's moving our object up. Right now it's just inheriting the position of our null object. So wherever our null object moves, the whole fracture object inherits it. That's not what we want. We want it to inherit its animation. So we'll click on animation, and now you can see if I hit play, it's playing from the bottom. So the first thing we do is that in the transform space, it's affect that the whole Voronoi fracture as an object is inheriting the animation. But we don't want that. We want the individual nodes within the Voronoi, which is the individual small chunks. So I'll change it from generator to nodes, and then the animation type, you see it's playing from down up, but we change it from to from out, right? And now if we hit play, you can see it's going the way we want it. Now the whole thing is moving. If we hit play, you can see animation is just 30 frames, right? But in the inheritance vector, it's starting at frame 0 and ending at frame 90. So it's stretching our animation. So first of all, let's let it end at frame 30, just like our animation. And now if we hit play, everything still follows. That's because it's moving all of them at the same time. So let's give it a little bit of gap, right? So this one goes and gives it a little bit, let's say 1 or 2 frames, so that the other one follows. So if I hit this, increase the step gap to like say 2, and now hit play, you can see they are individually moving upwards, but it's moving in the wrong direction. You can see it's moving from the bottom upwards, and that because it's using the index. It's moving the Voronoi by its index. So if I select the Voronoi fracture, come to my transform tab here, and I change the display mode from none to index, you can see the smallest index, which is 0, is this one, right? And 1, and continue, find all the till the top here. But we want it to start up here based on the index as well. So we want the index to be the 0 ones be up, so that the bigger ones come down somewhere here. And to do that, we can do something in the Voronoi fracture. Select the Voronoi fracture, come to this tab here called sorting, which I probably think I should do a quick video explaining a little bit, because it can be very useful in a lot of situations, right? So I'll come to the sorting tab. I'll make sure the sorting, I'll click make sure it's checked, and now let's change the sorting. It's set to X, let's set it to Y, right? And now we can see the 0 and 1s up here. So now I sort it from up. It's starting 0 and 1. It's starting from 0 up here and counting it down to the bottom here, right? If we want it the other way, we can also invert it so that the 0s and 1s will start from down here and count upwards. But we don't want that, so let's uncheck the invert sort. And now if we hit play, you can see now our chunks are inheriting the animation of our null object. So that's basically what you do to get the animation done. So from here going, you just adjust your animation and your timing and how fast you want it, right? So I'll come into the inheritance effector and I'll reduce the step gap like say 1, so that it goes quicker, something like that. And if you want, you can also adjust the animation speed, like you can make it start from frame 0 to frame just 15. So cut by half, and now hit play. See, right? So from here going, you play around with it to eventually you get the kind of animation that you want. So let me increase my number of frames to like say 170 or something, right? But I'll set it back to 30, and I'll leave the step gap to just one, and if you hit play, I think it should be able to animate the whole thing to the end of the whole frame. So at frame somewhere 150, I think 170, the whole animation ends. So that's basically how you get this done. From here going, you are going to see how I'll use this to create the loop, right? But if this all you how the technique basically is done. So now that we are done with the animation and everything, I'll select the Voronoi, come to the transform, and I'll set the display to none so that you don't see the numbers. We don't even need the colorized fragments and everything. So everything now is just the cubes, right? And if we check for display garage shading, you can see we have this nice well broken down chunks basically. So from here going, the thing I'm going to do is I'll bake my animation into Alembic. Now baking it into Alembic, what I'll do is that I'll put it in a connect object, because if I bake the Voronoi fracture as Alembic directly, it will create a lot of objects in my object manager, which I don't want. So I'll come into my object and I'll create a connect object, make the Voronoi fracture a child of the connect object, right? And I'll select the connect object, make sure world is unchecked, and now we can now right click on the connect object and see bake as Alembic, right? And within some few seconds your object will come where you want to save it. So I'll select the folder and I'll go ahead and bake it, and it's done. So basically we have our Alembic object saved, right? Let's change the display and everything, and if now we can go ahead and disable the Voronoi fracture and the initial one that we have everything, and now you can scrub through and you can see we have our animation, and this is the Alembic, right? So let's go ahead and set up our looping. So I've created a new scene and I've brought in my Alembic file that we baked in the previous scene, and it's just that one so that we don't get confused with anything. And all right, so let's actually go ahead and set the loop. And we know with the loop, all we have to do is make sure our first frame and our last frame are the same so that you don't see the jump or anything. So I have the object here, right? And you know it starts from frame 0 and it ends at somewhere at frame 165. The whole animation ends. So let's create another copy and hold Control and click and drag to create another copy. I'll select this one, and you see where this one ends. Let's move this one down. Select the second one that I've created. In fact, let's name this. I'll call this one, the first one 1, and I'll name the second one 2. So let's select the 2. Let's move it downwards like so, like minus 200 centimeters, and then come to the object tab. Let's offset its animation, right? Let's offset it to like 165, because that's where our first animation ends. So let's offset it 165. So when this one ends, let's increase our timeline. Now you can see this one is also continuing, right? This is exactly what you want. So at frame 0, this is how animation looks. So this one will start moving upwards, all right, and then this one too will start following. But I don't want at frame 0, I don't want it to start like flat like that. I want it to start with a little bit of animation, so we can offset it again like the offset that we use. So I can select the first one, and let's say we want it to offset like about minus 30 frames. So it's like it's gone, you know, let's minus 30 frames, right? So now you can see it starts from minus 30 because we've subtracted 30 from it. Now our animation wouldn't end at frame 165, it will end at 135. So you see at 135 everything is settled. So it means that we have to also bring this one to 135, right? So this is 135. Now you can see if I start scrubbing, this one will now begin to play. But same way we offsetted 30 frames from this one. Now let's subtract 30 frames from this one as well. So this one, the animation is supposed to start from 135, right? And we want to also offset it a bit like we did with the this one. So we subtract another 30, right? So it will now be 105, and now you can see. So from frame 0 and frame 135, we have these two animations. So another thing I'll do is that I'll create a cube, because we know the size of this. We'll create another, just a cube, and I'll move it on top here so that let's actually move it to 400 centimeters up here. So now you can see we have similar animation, right? So you don't see the cut. So now we know our animation start from 0 and end at 135. So let's reduce our number of frames to 135, and now everything is basically set. All we are left is to create our camera. So now let's create our camera. Right, may reset everything to 0, except the position Z. Let's set that one to like say 1000, and let's also move our position Y to like say 200 centimeters upwards. So this is how the whole thing starts. So if you hit play, you can see this is how it starts, and at frame 130 it comes down here. So let's animate the camera movement. So we want it to always be looking at the middle here. So at frame 0, I'll set a keyframe of the Y position, and at frame 135 I'll set it to 0, right, and I'll set another keyframe. So you can see our beginning frame and our end frame is the same. Let's change the filter to geometry only. So our beginning frame and our end frame is always the same. Now the animation of the camera is it's not linear, so let's select the camera and click on this line here to make it linear animation. And now from here going, you have your loop smoothly made. So if I hit play, you can see it loops smoothly. All right, so here from here going, what's next is you add a bit of bevel to it. So to add the bevel, actually you can delete this cube because it's not even showing. All right, so to add the bevel, we will animate our bevel. So I'll add come to my deformer, bevel deformer, and I'll add it to the first one, and at frame say 15, let's set a keyframe of 0 offset, so we don't have any bevel at frame 15, and at frame, let's say 50, we set it to 0.7, 0.7, right? So it smoothly bevels in here, and at frame 90 we set another keyframe, and at frame 135 we set it back to 0, right? So it comes on, right, and it smoothly comes in, and at the last frame it goes back to 0, right, so that it will smoothly blend in with the whole animation. So let's see how the whole thing looks like. We will probably need to use the same thing on the second part of the cube so that it feels well blended in. So we can drag and drop this one on the second one as well. So basically this is how you create the loop and now add your bevel, you animate all of those things. I just saw this this morning and I felt like it was interesting, so let's see if I could quickly recreate it using Cinema 4D, and this is what I was able to come up with. So I've not even I didn't waste time rendering it and adding all those textures and stuff. But I hope this video was useful and you've learned a couple of techniques or tricks in it. It's not necessarily about just the video itself, but about some of the things that you probably learned from this topic. Thank you for watching, and kindly subscribe if you've not, and I'll see you in the next one.